All right, so this part's called Save the Frogs, Translating Science into Action. And that is what I think we do. I have a scientific background, and I started Save the Frogs because when I was doing my scientific research back between 2003 and 2007, I realized that the vast majority of amphibian conservation at that time was restricted to academia. And when I would read scientific papers that would suggest changes that need to take place, I'd always wonder, was anyone implementing those changes? And usually my assumption was no. So I wanted to translate that science into action, and that's what Save the Frogs is all about. I founded Save the Frogs in 2008 as the world's first public charity dedicated exclusively to amphibian conservation. And our mission is to protect amphibian populations and to promote a society that respects and appreciates nature and wildlife. And so right now I'm going to be talking about a lot of our different programs around the world. And perhaps the most important, or one of my favorites for certain, and one of the longest running, is Save the Frogs Day, which takes place on the last Saturday of April every year. If you want to hold an event and you want to hold it on a Friday, that's perfectly fine. Just pick whatever day works best for you and your group near the end of April and celebrate Save the Frogs Day. Ideally, educate your local community or do something beneficial for the amphibians in your community. That's our goal for Save the Frogs Day. From my perspective, I want to inspire people to take action. I want to empower people with educational materials and ideas on what they can do. And I want to help promote people's events and make sure that people know what's going on around the world, and that keeps the cycle going. People hear what kind of event took place, they get inspired to hold an event of their own. So Save the Frogs Day, since 2009, at least 1,400 events have taken place in at least 58 countries. Probably a lot more than this. It's just a lot of people do not ever register their events, so I don't necessarily hear about all the events that take place. All right, so of relevance to you all is that since at least 2012, the Mountain Collegian Bangat State University has been holding Save the Frogs Day events. I think in most years, there may have been some years off, I'm not sure, but I know that I've sent over some video messages that get played before the events, and I've been happy to see all your photos coming in through the years. So that's 2012, and here's some 2013 event, 2014. All right, and a huge thank you to Grace for getting a lot of this happening. 2015, and I'm sure there's more photos. I did a quick search on my computer right before this, and these are the ones that showed up. Other types of events that happen around the world. There's a Save the Frogs Day rally in D.C. So Washington, D.C., at the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, I led a rally/protest calling on the EPA to ban atrazine, the herbicide that can turn male frogs into females. So we had about 40 supporters show up there and took a march through the streets of Washington, D.C., had Department of Homeland Security and police escorting us through the city, and went to the White House. The EPA got word of the event and invited me to speak there. A week later to their scientists, I delivered over 10,000 signatures to them. I've spoken to the EPA 3 times before calling on them to ban atrazine. Unfortunately, it's 10 years later and it is still legal, even though it is the most commonly detected pesticide in USA stream water, rainwater and groundwater, and has so much scientific research detailing the negative harms. And it's in use in at least 40 countries around the world. Antonelli Pond in Santa Cruz, California, endangered California red-legged frogs there. We'd get volunteers out there on Save the Frogs Day and throughout the year, restoring habitat, removing invasive weeds. Get some high school students out there from the local high school. Yeah, so there's invasive bullfrogs, invasive crayfish, invasive fish, and invasive weeds all at that one pond. Here's Brandon Balanger. He's an artist and a scientist and takes people out to show them their native frogs, get people educated about what's in their backyard. School in Nepal, 2010 Save the Frogs Day, and a lot of kids doing frog art on Save the Frogs Day. Avalon has been holding Save the Frogs Day events for over a decade. She's now, I believe she's finished up university. She may even be in graduate school now, but she's been holding Save the Frogs Day events for a very long time. Very successful environmental conservationist. In Nepal, they held their first national seminar on frogs on the occasion of Save the Frogs Day, 2011. The first time they'd had a national event on frogs. And that certainly looks like Biraj Shrestha. I never even noticed him in this. And he is still 10 years later, 11 years later, saving frogs. He's been very active in Save the Frogs and is currently applying for a doctoral position. South Korea, they're celebrating at the site of a wetland that they helped protect from incoming skyscraper apartment buildings that were set to be built there. University students in Uganda. This is me in Colombia. I'm actually in Colombia right now. I just flew in last night or got here this morning. I'm in Bogota, Colombia. This was in Medellin, the other, or probably the second largest city in the country. And this is at one of the main science museums, so I gave a presentation and then held this info table to educate people about the amphibians. We've had a 5K race for 2 years in downtown Seattle. 260 runners. We had 4 amphibian biologists, including myself, giving presentations. In Bangladesh, we've got a lot of university groups involved, and they like to hold parades through the city centers to raise awareness. They also get undergrads and grad students and go out on field trips to find the frogs and do some field research. Save the Frogs Day in Pakistan, the Pakistan Girl Guides. One of my favorite things about Save the Frogs and Save the Frogs Day is the huge diversity of people who are involved. Nepal has been very active in Save the Frogs events. This is an event that was funded by a Save the Frogs Day grant in Nigeria, West Africa. And this is up in the north of Colombia in the mountains. There are some very endangered frogs. Actually, the most threatened part of the world for amphibians is in Latin America. So Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, Panama, Costa Rica. That part of the world has had a lot of amphibian extinctions, and in part because there is the highest biodiversity in this part of the world. So this Professor Beto would take his students out sampling for chytrid fungus up in the mountains with Atelopus frogs. Those are the endangered frog species. Le Monde, the largest paper in France, featured Save the Frogs on the front cover for Save the Frogs Day in 2010. France, a place where it's not legal to eat native frogs because they already ate most of their native frogs. Unfortunately, now they import most of them in from places like Indonesia, the world's #1 exporter of amphibians. We got a 2-minute spot on CNN Worldwide TV. And Save the Frogs Day is also a really good way to get politicians educated. Here's Avalon again and Rachel Hopkins. Both of them sent letters to their politicians to get Save the Frogs Day officially recognized. So it's been officially recognized by the states of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Michigan, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and the mayors of Washington, D.C., Vancouver, Santa Cruz, and Tampa, Florida. All right, you all are officially the first people to see the 2022 Save the Frogs Day art. This is actually not finished. That's why I have not put it up anywhere else, but this is our draft version. I have a graphic designer working on this right now. So I encourage you all to hold another event end of April this year. And if you already have plans for that, then when I'm done talking, I'd be happy to hear about that. Excited to hear about that. Another thing you can mark your calendar for is the Save the Frogs World Summit. This is going to happen the first week of April. So the page is already live. If you go to savethefrogs.com/summit, I think it should be up there. We just updated the webpage, and I believe it's April 6th and 7th. It may be 5th and 6th, but it's right in there, the end of the first week of April. And we have we've got presentations going on pretty much around the clock from amphibian experts and conservationists from around the world, online, on Zoom, and we've held this before. It's a great way to learn a lot about amphibians from a very diverse range of presenters. So I encourage everybody to go to the site. You register, just enter your name and email address, and we'll make sure that you get the login info. All right, other things I do for Save the Frogs. I've given many presentations. Okay, to the best of my knowledge, this is my 442nd Save the Frogs presentation. So I've done this a few times before, talking to university groups, community groups, politicians, businesses about amphibians and ways that they can get involved and improve their environmental or lessen their environmental impact, negative impact, and improve their positive environmental impact on the world. So I've spoken to at least 24,000 attendees at these events. And let's see. Save the Frogs used to be based in California in the San Francisco, Santa Cruz area. And it's an important place for amphibians because there's actually been some kind of anti-frog legislation or some votes that could have helped the frogs but did not succeed. So there's definitely some politicians that need to be educated there. And so we've had a San Francisco Tadpole Head Start program where we would go out to schools educating kids in San Francisco, and another group, Tree Frog Treks, would go there with native tadpoles and educate the kids about the life cycles of the frogs. This also in California, Manor School. This in North Carolina, which is the most amphibious state in the United States with 91 species. This is one of my favorite presentations or events, we'll say. This was in a very poor part of California. A lot of migrant farm workers, kids there. And the school had contacted Save the Frogs saying they wanted to help. And I said it would be great if the kids could send a letter to their politicians and try to get an official state amphibian for California. California did not have an official state frog or state amphibian. And they sent a letter to Manuel Perez, right there, their assembly member. And he decided to introduce legislation. And a couple of the kids and parents, teachers, superintendent, and myself went to Sacramento, the state capital, and we gave presentations, and we won that vote 8-0, won another vote 52-8, and it got signed into law by Governor Jerry Brown to have California's state amphibian, the California red-legged frog. There's Team Red-Legged Frog who helped out making that happen. Kids can get a lot done because it's hard to say no to kids. So if you can ever get kids involved in your environmental campaigns, then you have a higher chance of success. Save the Frogs grants. The next round of Save the Frogs grants starts on February 1st and goes through about March 1st. So if you do want to apply for a grant, you can go look at that. We give out grants for Save the Frogs Day events, for amphibian conservation in general, and then occasional conference travel, which hasn't been happening too much lately. But we've given out over $100,000, 47 awardees in 16 countries, and we definitely have at least $8,000 scheduled to be dispersed this spring. Save the Frogs Academy, I encourage all of you to go to SaveTheFrogs.com. In general, go to the website. If you've never been to SaveTheFrogs.com, definitely go check it out. We've got a lot of info up there. SaveTheFrogs.com/academy. Go to that page. You can sign up for 28 free days, full access, and go educate yourself with our online courses. If you like it and want it more, you could either become a Save the Frogs member by donating to Save the Frogs, or if you don't have the funds to do that, then you go apply for a scholarship on our site, SaveTheFrogs.com/scholarships, and that will give you full access to Save the Frogs Academy and a Save the Frogs membership. So I encourage all of you, if you want to deepen your knowledge of frogs, then that's a good place to start. In Canada, at Lake Erie, there were plans to build a 11 or so story high apartment complex with a restaurant right on top of Fowler's toad habitat. There are only 3 locations in Canada with these toads. We held a Save the Frogs Academy online course where the course was all about getting students educated about that campaign and doing something to prevent the building from being built. And we succeeded with the help of some groups, some local groups in Canada. And it's been about 8 years now, and those toads are still living there. The place never got built because it became too controversial. They could not pre-sell the units. Foothill yellow-legged frog, a threatened frog in California. They live in the rivers. The rivers get dammed up for hydroelectric, changes the water temperature and the water flow, and it impacts the frogs. So the city of San Francisco wanted to do construction right in the middle of the river, and we did not want them to do that. I was sending them letters. They were not listening to me, so we paid an environmental attorney, Michael Graff, who actually, one of my volunteers is writing up an article all about him. It'll go up on the site probably within a week. So if you want to learn about environmental law and about Michael, he sent a letter to the city of San Francisco, and within 10 days they had canceled the project. So at least in that one stretch of Alameda Creek, they are safer than they would have been. All right, we helped get threatened endangered species status statewide for California tiger salamanders, getting our supporters to write letters to the politicians. We won with a 3-2 vote. A lot of votes go that close. That's why it's so important to speak up and to send in, if there's a public hearing, you can go talk, you can send in your letter, and that goes a long way. So I've talked about American bullfrogs, one of the world's most invasive species, and they get spread around the world because they're the number one frog farmed for food, and they have very high rates of infectious disease, especially chytrid fungus. They usually don't die from it. They'll just spread it to the native frogs and eat native frogs. So we've been working for 10 years to get the state of California to stop importing. The state of California allows the importation of over 2 million American bullfrogs each year. So we've been deeply involved with the state to work on stopping that. Not successful yet, but hopefully it's getting closer. All right, building a frog pond is one of the best things that people can do for frogs, especially if you live in a dry place where there's not a lot of water. So we've had ponds built at schools. Students get involved. This one's right in the middle of San Francisco, and I guess they wanted to keep the kids out of there, so they built a cage over it. Frogs could get in, though. There were a couple frogs calling in there. This in Columbia, there were also a couple different species calling when I visited this school. And we've also built really big wetlands, like 50 meters across, in partnership with federal agencies and state agencies. Get heavy equipment, bulldozers, excavators out there. And the great thing about wetlands is once there's water in it, the frogs can make use of it right away, like immediately after the first rain. This is in back of a school. The kids held the school held a Save the Frogs Day course for 6 weeks, and it culminated with 2 days of building this little pond that serves as an outdoor classroom for the students. Different school right here. This used to be wetland, but it got drained when they cut this ditch here. So it still occasionally had frogs there because it would fill up for part of the year. But we got about 700 students and teachers out there over the course of 2 days and built 7 little wetlands on the property. As you can tell, the kids love it. They get exercise, they get outside, they get wetlands built, learn a lot about frogs. This at a high school. In 1 day, we built this wetland. And there are 4 endangered species in the area, so this is an important place for habitat. This was a mining site, an abandoned mining site, and as I said, after the first rain, frogs can come, and that's what happened right here. So we spent 5 days building this, and then there were frogs there right away. All right, we like to take people out into the wild for 10 to 12 days on our eco tours in Central and South America. So we've held tours in Belize, Peru, visited Machu Picchu, Ecuador, and Costa Rica, where I was a couple months ago. We'll be back in Costa Rica this June and July for 2 more tours. We've had a lot of activity in Ghana, West Africa. Important place because 90% of West Africa's rainforests have been destroyed. So my first trip there was in 2011 with a goal to inspire youth and students to pursue environmental careers. We formed Save the Frogs Ghana as the first international branch of Save the Frogs, and KNUST University chapter, our first student chapter of Save the Frogs. And we've had many different projects, such as working to create a new national park to protect this frog. Togo slippery frog only lives on 2 streams in the whole planet, and they're under threat from bauxite mining. So we've got more student groups in the country, and they help to educate their citizens about whatever their local issue is, such as the mining. Save the Frogs Day parades, educational events. We've held a world summit. We've had lots of habitat restoration. Giant squeaker frogs. There were only 13 frogs known to exist when we started working with them. Now there's at least 28. There it is. We've planted at least 15,000 trees with the helps of the local villagers and schools. And returned in 2016 with a team of 3 from the United States, met up with our friends in Ghana, visited the universities and the schools, made some new friends. Held an all-day world summit. Visited some frog habitat, saw a lot of habitat destruction, but we did find some really amazing frogs as well, so they're still hanging in there. Visited a junior chapter of Save the Frogs where they were already educated about amphibians because our university groups had been working with them. And we celebrated the 5th birthday of Save the Frogs Ghana. The whole village came out to celebrate. The chiefs of the village came out to celebrate. The building in the background was inaugurated or opened up, and that is a Save the Frogs Ghana Education Center. into which we put 5 computers, which were the first computers in the village, and a little environmental library with books. I was inducted as a chief of environment, so that gets us more access to the community to get good stuff done. So, as I said, one of my favorite things about Save the Frogs, diversity and our ability to connect cultures. The education center we had for about a year and a half in Berkeley, California, and so we would have live events there. A lot of frog art up on the walls from our Save the Frogs art contest, and that was my office for a while, so a very froggy place to work. We helped save Florida's pig frogs. They were being eaten. They were being served at a very expensive restaurant in San Francisco. I wrote the owner and I said, please stop serving frog legs so we do not have to protest in front of your expensive restaurant. And they did remove those from the menu. We got frog legs out of 77 supermarkets, Wegmans supermarket chain. We have had frog legs protests at restaurants that refuse to stop serving frog legs. And currently they no longer serve frog legs to the best of my knowledge. I'm happy about that. Kids came out. New Zealand wanted to open up some areas to mining, which would have harmed the Hochstetter's frogs and the Archie's frog, which has been called the world's #1 most evolutionarily distinct and globally endangered amphibian species. We had 1,250 supporters send letters to the New Zealand government, and they did abandon that project. Mountain yellow-legged frogs, 2,000 letters sent to the National Park Service, and it took them many, many years to get this in motion, but they have been removing non-native fish from over 60 water bodies in the national park. This is the frog that has disappeared from 93% of their historic localities. And one of our biggest successes, perhaps our biggest legislative success, a federal ban on the importation of 201 salamander species. And this is because in Europe, there have been major die-offs of salamanders caused by a different kind of chytrid fungus, Batrachochytrium salamandrivorans, and we do not want that in the United States. I've provided a lot of training for scientists, specifically related to the chytrid fungus, and using quantitative PCR testing to detect the chytrid fungus. So we organized an event in Panama City, and for 5 days I taught qPCR techniques to biologists from Panama, Colombia, and Costa Rica so that they could do their research on chytrid fungus. We've gotten dissections out of at least 18 schools, gotten them to stop their dissection programs and given them virtual dissection software in return. We just had a major victory at Tesla Park in California where they wanted to open up the park to off-highway vehicles. You can tell that that's not very good on the land or the amphibians. And after many, many years, we were able to get legislation to stop this from happening. All right, so let me at least check in with everybody. I could certainly, I've got probably 10 or 15 more minutes, but I don't want to keep you up. I'd be happy to come back another time and talk. But it's more of the same kind of stuff. We go out there, we educate people. When necessary, we do environmental campaigning, get laws in place, and habitat restoration. And as you could tell, there's a lot of different ways to save the frogs. So hopefully that gave you a ton of ideas for your own environmental conservation efforts.
So I guess, sir, we have a question here raised in the Zoom chat. So may
Okay.
I read the first question? How do you support Save the Frogs financially? We would like to know how you maintain the organization considering that it is worldwide.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me do this. Let me reshare my screen here, and let's actually go check out the. All right, so I didn't get to it, but we do have an art contest, and I invite everyone to take part. It's ongoing all year round, so go ahead and enter savethefrogs.com/art. But most of our funding comes from individuals, so we've got this donate now button right here, and a lot of people go there and place their online donation with a credit card. We also we can accept cryptocurrency, we can accept checks, and all kinds of ways that people can donate. And I guess I just make sure that people know that we seek money. If people don't know you're looking, then they're not as likely to give. So at the bottom of all the emails I send out, it's got that same donate now button. And I'd like to think that it's very clear if someone comes to the website that we're a public charity. We depend on donations. We make good use of donations. There's this button right here, support us. And it's got lots of ways that people can financially support us. So if anyone does want to support Save the Frogs, then we welcome your support. And I probably would start right here, support us, and it has lots of info on that. Now, we do occasionally apply for grants. We've definitely won some grants over the years. I don't do that too much anymore because I just prefer focusing on other ways to raise money. There's lots of ways to raise money. Certainly not easy, certainly not in the early, well, it can be, if one has a focus on raising money, if they have a good project, if they can communicate clearly, then they should be able to raise some funds. And especially the longer that you're around and the more successes that you have and the more people know about you, the easier it gets. Of course, the bigger your programs become, maybe you need more money and you need to raise more. But I think over the years it's become easier. I've become a better fundraiser. We've got more supporters, and that's how we do it. So I'll go ahead and read the next question. It says, you said frogs can't be eaten. I didn't say they cannot be eaten. I said, or I implied, I prefer people not be eating them. So that says, does this mean that the indigenous people who consider frogs as part of their foods are violating such? Yeah, what I like to divide the line. I like to say there's people who need to eat and they don't have many options. And then there's people who need to eat. I mean, everyone needs to eat, but we have lots of options. I can go out to the grocery store and buy something that's not a frog. And that's most of us. So I guess most of our programs are frog legs programs, say no to frog meat. And we don't focus too much on frog legs anymore. We have in the past. But that's usually being aimed at people who have a choice. And in the United States, most of the frogs that are being eaten, I'll say, or I can't say most, I don't have a set number, but a lot of it is not even like I really need to eat. It's more just kind of a fun thing to do. Like there's frog legs festivals. Let's go out and drink beer and eat frog legs. Or a lot of bars have frog legs because people who are drinking think it's funny to eat frog legs. So those are definitely, the first level of frog consumption that can be changed. All right, another question. Frogs can live on both water and land. Is it possible to find frogs in the Middle East where water is constrained? Yeah, there's actually a famous frog in Israel, the hula painted frog, and it was thought to be extinct for decades, I believe. And then maybe 5 years ago or so, it was rediscovered because perhaps water came back to the destroyed wetland areas. And so, yeah, there's frogs out there. There's frogs living in deserts in Australia, in all over the world. Deserts do have frogs. You're not going to see very many. They're not going to be very biodiverse areas. But frogs and toads, maybe it only rains once during the year. Maybe it won't rain at all. Some frogs, they don't need anything. They'll be underground, burrowed down, covered up in a cocoon of old skin, And then when they feel the rains coming down, they will emerge and breed, go back underground. All right, next question. What do you do if there are endangered species of amphibians? Well, let's see. I guess there's a couple ways to go about things. You could say, what is the most endangered species? And that's where I'm going to put my effort, if you decide you should be focusing on them. Or with Save the Frogs, oftentimes it doesn't work that way for us. I'm more of the time for me, I'm like, where are the people who are willing to put in some work to save the frogs, and how can I support those people and their activities, such as Tesla Park, that I said was the place with the off-highway vehicles. There was a local group. Local groups usually care more than anybody else, especially when someone wants to put in lots of loud vehicles destroying their neighborhood. They're really dedicated. Okay? So when they contact me, then I'm like, yeah, I can help with that because I care about the project and you are putting in a lot of work. So, yeah, because I can't do anything if there's nobody there. I mean, I personally could, but I like having other people involved. So I need to go where the people are. Now, so yeah, it's a mix of that. Like, what frog should we help because they need the help, and then where there are the people to do it. But once you identify a species, I guess the first level is figuring out what the threats to amphibians are, or the threat to that amphibian. So what is the threat? Oh, there's a group of off-highway vehicle activists, or really it was the California Department of Motor Recreation. I can't remember their precise name, but there's actually a governmental department, and their mission is to ensure that people can ride their off-highway vehicles. So there's a conflict there. They want off-highway vehicles, and another division of California government wants land protected. So you got to identify the threat and, hopefully work with the people. If there are certain people causing the threat, that's the first thing to try, but of course they may not care. So education, there's always going to be an educational component. You got to educate the politicians if they're involved. I like not having to deal with politicians. If I don't have to deal with politicians, great, because a bureaucracy slows things down. I like doing the things that I have full control over. Nobody can stop me from educating somebody. If you can connect with the landowners, or if you own land and you think the frogs need habitat, you can build wetlands. If it's farmland and there's too many pesticides, you can educate the farmers about pesticides. You could train them in better techniques. In Ghana, villagers were burning down trees to collect honey. They had to get the bees out. They'd smoke them out. It would set fires in the forest. It would destroy a lot. The farmers would come into the destroyed land and do stuff there. It was a bad cycle. So we raised money, applied for grants to buy beekeeping equipment and pay for people to train the villagers in beekeeping techniques. And then that reduces the need for them to go out and set fires in the forest. So yeah, it comes down to determine what the threats are, determine who the important people are, educate the people, go out into the community, ideally make some friends with as many people as you can, talk to the politicians if you need to, talk to the companies who can help if you need to, raise some funds, and stay on. You may be in for, it may be longer than you think. I didn't think I'd still be talking to the state of California about bullfrogs 12 years later. But 2 weeks ago, I was on a Fish and Game Commission meeting, and I said, hey, my first time speaking to you was May 3rd or May 10th, 2010, and here I am about the same issue. So you may be in it for the long haul, so be prepared. All right, so the next question is, or it's not a question, it's a statement maybe. Frogs can't be eaten but can be used on scientific experimentation. So, yeah, again, frogs, it's another slight conflict. We potentially gain benefit from research done on frogs. That research may or may not be harmful to the frogs. So the first level is hopefully the scientists involved have had some training and put in some thought as to scientific ethics. And hopefully they're reducing the harm to the amphibians that they're experimenting on. So that just comes down to the group of scientists. And I've traveled around the world. I've met lots of scientists. Scientists have different views on ethics and what is not ethical. And it changes by generation. I think that the younger generation thinks about this a whole lot more. And probably needs to, because 50 years ago, there were a lot more frogs. And there were a lot less people on the planet. There were a lot fewer threats to frogs. So maybe it didn't matter so much. You know, if you go out and do something that harms frogs, well, there wasn't a lot of knowledge about it. So you could say, well, the benefit is we're gaining a lot of knowledge. There's lots of frogs already. Whereas now we know a lot about frogs. And there's a lot more threats and there's a lot less frogs. So we need to be more careful for certain and more thoughtful as from the scientific perspective. I think we have a question out here from Mathan. Sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly.
All right. Hello, it's me again.
Hi.
You can call me Matt for short.
Okay.
People get my name wrong. Anyway, I just have a quick question. Can we, as citizens, as people who live here, can we actually, like, procure frogs, maybe buy them in the market, or get some that are in the wilderness and reintroduce them to their habitats here to, like, repopulate the ecosystem with frogs? Is that, like, a good solution, or is it not sustainable, or what are the implications, or whatnot? Thank you for your response.
Okay. Yeah, the first thing to recognize is that frog populations vary significantly through the years. In one given location, one year, you may not hear frogs, or there may just be a few. And the next year, they're all over the place. And that changes just based on changing weather and rainfall levels and environmental factors and what happened in past years. So I always caution people before they think like all the frogs are gone. They're probably not all gone. But, you know, if it happens year after year after year, then there's a bad trend, then yeah, it's certainly possible. But don't be surprised if this year or next year there's more frogs there. Now, if you can see that there's more development and habitat destruction, then, you know, there is a much higher chance that the frogs are at reduced levels. So what you're talking about is repopulating the habitat and translocating frogs from one location to another location. I don't like, or I'll say, I prefer people not translocate amphibians unless they're a dedicated team of scientists and there's been a lot of thought put into what's going to happen. And that's because amphibians have diseases, as we discussed, and we don't know what could be introduced into that area if we bring new frogs there. And also, it's possible there are already frogs there, and it would be like if someone dropped off a bunch of humans in your house, there'd be conflict. So it's best that what we do is ensure the habitat is suitable for the frogs. Because if the habitat is livable, if they could be there, they probably will find it. Because there's probably a frog, especially in your part of the world, It's tropical. There's a lot of frogs around. One of them is going to be hopping by eventually and will find this place and start calling, and other frogs will hear that and they'll find it. So that's when, like when we build a wetland, we don't ever bring frogs to the wetland. We just build the wetland. Ideally, the best place to build a wetland is somewhere nearby within geographical range, within movement range of other amphibians of that target species. So, for instance, the California red-legged frogs in El Dorado National Forest in California. There were frogs living right outside the border of the national forest. So, if you know enough about the frog, you may know this frog can travel 3 kilometers in a year or whatever it happens to be. And therefore, let's build the new wetlands within 3 kilometers of where the frogs exist. And chances are they're going to be hopping around and they're going to find it. And if they like it, they're going to stay. So to sum all that up, don't put frogs there. First, focus on ensuring that the habitat is suitable.
And to end our webinar, can we hear another one final message to our speaker, Dr. Kriger? I will give this floor to you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, well, another thank you for your 10 years or so of involvement in Save the Frogs, and I wish you the best of luck with your hopefully upcoming Save the Frogs Day event, and with all of your environmental activities. And I think you guys did a very good job getting people to show up on this event. I'm happy to do this again in the future. And let's see, just stay involved, stay in touch with Save the Frogs, and whatever your environmental goals are. They're not always easily achieved, but I do believe that everybody who is dedicated and educated can get a whole lot done for the planet.
Thank you, sir. We hope to see you here in the Philippines soon.
Thanks. I had a picture. I forgot to show you my picture. I was in the Philippines in 2019. I went to Manila and Palawan, and I had a picture. I forgot to show it, but I had a very good time there, and I do appreciate your invite. And when I return, I will come up and visit you guys.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. We, the participants, the Icon Magazine, the Mountain Collegian, and Benguet State University are more than blessed and grateful to have you with us today. Thank you for sparing your time and effort to mold our minds as young learners and carers of Mother Nature. And you are more than welcome to come and pay a visit, because not only the frogs are colorful here, but also the delicacies and the travel destinations are very promising as well. Once again, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for your time and effort to be with us today.